Welcome to another Action for Happiness live event. It's absolutely lovely to have you all with us, to see hundreds of people already joining us again for another one of these wonderful discussions we've been hosting for many, many months now. And I'm really delighted to be joined today by Meik, who we've had at many Action for Happiness events before in person. This is the first time we've done something together online, Meik, and it's lovely to see you again.
Likewise. Thanks for having me back.
Yes, and I'm really excited about this evening's topic about making happy memories, but I'm also really keen to share all of your great work in the field of happiness research, but particularly how we can apply that in our lives and to help others as well. You've written so many great books that bring this to life and help make it a reality for people. So thank you all for being here. And as always, people, please do join in the chat. It's lovely to see you welcoming each other already from all around the world. Let's keep it kind and friendly as always. And you can also ask any questions you'd like to pose to Meik in the Q&A function. So please do get involved, vote up each other's questions, and we'll make time for those towards the end of the conversation we're going to be having together. But Meik, I guess to kick things off, you are CEO of this Happiness Research Institute in Denmark. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your own journey and why this topic of happiness matters so much to you.
Sure. Also, maybe I should just point out, being based in Denmark, being Danish is my first language. So English is my second language. And I've noticed when I speak English compared to Danish, I need to concentrate more. And I get this really grumpy look on my face, which is not good when you're a happiness researcher. So sorry if I get a grumpy look on my face. It just means I'm concentrating. So I am really happy to be back at Action for Happiness. Always a big fan of what you guys are doing. So my own journey with happiness research started almost a decade ago. I was working for another think tank here in Copenhagen, where we were focusing on the green economy, on sustainability. And I had been there for about 7 years, and we're starting to sort of look for the next thing to do, not feeling as passionate about the job as I did when I first started out. And then one late evening in the office, I stumbled upon something called the World Happiness Report. So this was back in 2012. And those familiar with the report know it's a UN commissioned report. It sort of gives an overview of happiness research, but it also presents a ranking of happiness or life satisfaction across, I think it was 155 countries in the first report. And Denmark was in first place. And I thought, that's strange. We don't look particularly happy. Why is it that Denmark is often doing well in these happiness rankings? There should be somebody in Denmark, trying to understand that, to study that. There should be somebody creating a think tank on happiness. And then I thought, maybe I should do that. And I just got really excited over working with happiness. You know this, having worked with happiness, it's a really fun field to study. And it's also a testimony that we're so many people here tonight from all across the world, because this is something we all share. It's something we are all interested in. It's something we're all pursuing. And it's something we're all experts in. It's something we can all contribute to understanding. And I was laying awake at night back in 2012, thinking about the different sort of studies you could conduct within happiness research. And I just felt there was a lot of energy in myself around that field. But this was also 2012, so the wake of the financial crisis, and I had a steady, well-paying job at the other think tank. And I thought maybe it is also a little bit crazy to start a happiness research institute. But then on the personal side, what happened was I had a mentor I really looked up to at the old think tank. He was a super good boss, and he looked like he was a really good family man, great dad to his kids, and a good husband. And I thought, I want to be that guy in 15 years. And unfortunately, he got very ill and unfortunately died. And he died when he was 49. And many years ago, my own mother had also died when she was 49. So back in 2012, I was 34. So I had 15 years left until I would be 49. So I just started to think, if I only have 15 years left, what should I do with those years? Should I continue with this job, which is fine and it's steady and it's okay, but I'm not super passionate about it? Or are you going to create what you are really excited about, a happiness research institute, a think tank on well-being? And essentially, I just quit and started out with what I thought was a good idea and a bad laptop. And I think that's going to be the best decision that I'm going to make in my career. It's really fun to work in happiness research. We are now a team of 10 in Copenhagen, but also in other cities. And I get to work with some really great, bright, and lovely people. So good decision.
Yeah, Mike, thank you for sharing that. I feel similarly blessed having the chance to spend my life and passion working on the Action for Happiness movement and trying to bring these important ideas to help others. And something about what you've said there about when you're facing your own mortality, I think is a thing we might come back to, this idea of waking up, which I think has been going on to some extent globally in the recent pandemic, people realizing what really matters. But before we dive into that, before we talk about your most recent book, all about happy memories, which I'm really excited to delve into, let's start with the basics. You've been looking into what really makes us happy for many years, data from all around the world, your own experience. What are the things that you'd most like to share with this amazing community right now? I suspect in some ways it's nothing new under the sun, but I'd still love to hear you summarize what you think is most important in the findings.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There's nothing new under the sun. I mean, Aristotle came to the same conclusion 200 years ago. And, researchers, we really like to find new things. We like to get headlines. And I don't think we're going to get headlines from saying that relationships are really important for happiness. I think we all knew that. Connections are perhaps one of the best predictors of whether people are happy or not. I think that's one of the most robust findings in happiness research. But I think it's also quite comforting that what we would expect to find in studies, in data, we actually find that. So I think the metrics we are working with works. But we also often talk in Denmark about sort of the ABC for mental health. So what people can do to boost their well-being on a daily basis. And ABC stands for act, belong, commit. So doing something together with other people, doing something active and doing something meaningful is what we usually advise people to do if they're just looking for a universal piece of advice. And that
I like that a lot. So that's the ABC, act as in being physically active, is that? But belonging is about relationships, and committing is doing it in a way that kind of leads to a meaningful action. Have I understood that right?
Committing to a purpose, like being a volunteer for Action for Happiness, for example, doing something that serves a greater good. So that can be a big scale. It can also be small scale. Last fall, we had a beautiful fall day in Denmark, and 3 of my friends and my girlfriend, we went up to a forest just north of Copenhagen. So it was during the pandemic, so of course we had to spread out and distance each other, but you can do that in a forest. And we were out, we were together, we were active, and we were looking for edible mushrooms. So it was ticking all the boxes in terms of a lovely afternoon, and we had a picnic under the trees. And I think looking for activities like that is quite useful in our global pursuit for happiness.
And that lovely simple example reminds me of a theme I've heard you talking about before, Mike, about the connection between happiness and wealth. We tend to get rather obsessed in modern culture about possessions and income and financial measures of well-being. But what you've just reminded us there is that sometimes it's the simple things that really contribute. Well, what does that relationship look like to you?
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, yes, money does matter, because being without money is a cause of worry and stress and potentially misery. But after a certain point, additional income is not going to impact my quality of life. And I like cities where we basically remove the price tag there is for happiness, where you can enjoy life, whether you are rich or poor. Having great parks adds to quality of life for everyone. Another example, and I think that this is also sort of at the personal level, how do we decouple wealth and well-being? Which activities gives me joy and satisfaction with life that are free? I like to look for those because that removes the power that money can sometimes have over us. So one example is one of my favorite things to do in the summertime is going to the harbor in Copenhagen. So I think now almost 20 years ago, the water in the harbor in Copenhagen was cleaned. So now you can swim in it during summer. And obviously our summer lasts for about 2 days and then it's back to winter time again. But those 2 days are really amazing. So going there on a summer's day after work, seeing my friends, going for a swim, perhaps having a beer afterwards, that is what gives me quality of life. And that is something that is free and something that I can enjoy, whether I'm rich and poor or poor.
Well, I really love this idea. And of course, as you say, we mustn't be, we've got to be careful in how we talk about this, because clearly, if you are struggling financially, it's really, really hard to really thrive and flourish. But nevertheless, what you've said is absolutely true, that many of the real joys in life don't require or are available freely. Why don't we just turn to the community? I always love to hear from people at these events. So why don't we ask them a question along those lines, maybe to say, what's something that makes you happy, brings happiness to you or others, and that is free or freely available to you. So if you'd like to, or something comes to mind, please feel free to share in the chat, and then maybe Mike and I, we can sort of share responses to that. So walking, dancing, wild swimming, nature, helping others, trees, reading, music, the beach, park run, my dog, friendship, birds in the garden, painting, foraging, sport, vegetables, my wife, camping, meditation. This is a fantastic list. Libraries, jokes, my wolf, fantastic. Sex, children, cats, yoga, gratitude, charity, volunteering. Wow, I'm getting a real buzz reading these. Mike, how does that make you feel?
No, it's lovely, and I really like this because it again shows me how similar we are across different cultures. Walking in natural spaces, time with my chickens, wild swimming animals, cycling, all of those things make me happy as well. And I'm of course free. A big fan of dogs, big fan of walking, big fan of swimming. So I'm completely on board with those.
Yeah, thank you everyone in the community for sharing that. That's really brought a smile to my face, and it's nice to reflect on these things. Life's full of challenges though, Mike, and we are dealing with lots of issues in our own personal lives and worries as we look around us in society. Have you discovered in your research any things that particularly help us sort of cope in difficult times and build our resilience? I mean, obviously relationships, you've already mentioned, is vital for that, but what else comes to mind when you think about responding to tough times?
Well, I think especially in the past year, drawing on the happy memories we have collected in the past have actually been quite useful. It's been a time where a lot of us have been isolated at home, not being able to see people, not being able to travel, and I think retrieving some of the happy memories we've experienced in the past, looking at old photographs, bringing happy memories back to life. I think that is something we have benefited or could benefit from in the past 18 months. We also know those people that have happy memories and can retrieve happy memories and have a positive view of the past also are more satisfied with life. So yeah, harvesting old happy memories and sort of reliving them, I think is also something that has been quite useful, at least for me in the past 18 months.
That's really, really nice, and actually chimes with me because I feel like that's been on my mind during these recent months as well. And of course, this is a lovely bridge into your most recent book about making happy memories, and indeed the theme that we've sort of led on this evening. So let's turn to that for a bit. I guess one thing I hope we'll come on to in a moment is this idea of how we can actively sort of live in a way that would help us build more happy memories for the future. But before we go there, why don't we just focus a bit on what you've just said about bringing to life happy memories? So what are some of the ways we can do that? I mean, on a short-term basis, pausing at the end of the day and recalling things we're grateful for is a sort of daily practice. But how do we bring back to life some of those happier times from earlier days or different experiences?
Well, we need to understand that memory works through association. So finding memory triggers, and that can be all the 5 different senses. So Andy Warhol, for instance, he used the power of scent. He would wear the same perfume for 6 months and then never wear that perfume again, and then switch every 6 months. And that meant that over time, he had created what he called a museum of memories. So he could say, okay, now I want to see what I remember from the spring of 1981, and then take a whiff of that perfume and then see what comes back. That's perhaps a little exotic, but listen to what was in the top charts music-wise when you were in high school, and see what comes back. Take a walk around the town you grew up in, and I promise you things will come back. So you see something, you smell something, you hear something, and then memories are going to be retrieved.
That's really nice. And when we were talking the other day, you were sort of hinting at, or when I asked about how to do this with loved ones, you talked about I could, maybe go back to a place where my parents were born, or they spent part of their life with them, and actually sort of relive experiences with them. It both helps them relive their happy memories and forms a greater connection between us. I really like that suggestion.
Yeah.
What about this idea about how we can behave in ways that will form memories of what we're going through now that we can then benefit from in the future? Are there some tips and tricks we can use there?
Yeah, first of all, I think the main takeaway from the book and my research in the book was getting to an understanding that there is actually a lot we can do to influence what we and our loved ones remember in the future. And sort of thinking of yourself as a memory architect, and actually knowing, okay, there's something I can do when my daughter in 30 years looks back on her childhood. There's something I can do to have her think of happy times and happy moments. And I'll give you 2 examples, one simple and one advanced. And the simple one was actually a Polish reader of mine. In the book, there's a chapter about attention, which is the very foundation of memory. Of course, you don't remember anything if you're not paying attention. But this lady told me of an evening that happened 30 years ago when she was about 8, and she was having dinner with her mother and her sister. And they're having a lovely time. They're laughing, they're feeling happy. And then at one point, her mother turns to her and her sister, and she says, "I hope you remember this moment." And here we are 30 years later, the lady still remembers that moment because her mother made her pay attention to it. And of course, it can also be overused, because if you every time you sit down with your kids say, "I hope you remember this moment," they're probably going to tell you to shut up quite fast. But used every once in a while, I think it's really powerful. That's the simple one. The complex one is understanding that we remember first-time experiences much better than something we've experienced many times. It's also why people will often have a lot of memories from their teenage years and their 20s. Whereas in their 40s and 50s, we remember fewer things from. So, when I was 21, I remember, going to Paris, falling head over heels in love with the girls from Spain, going to Champagne, picking grapes for 2 weeks, going back to Spain to write some really bad fiction. I remember the price of a café con leche was 225 pesetas. I have a lot of details from that year, 21. When I was 31 or 41, I remember I was probably going to the office a lot, but I don't have that sort of same detailed, vivid memory as I did when I was 21. And we remember first-time experiences better. They stick better to memory. So what we can do is seek out new experiences. And it's also why I love that you at Action for Happiness, you have that calendar for November. is it Novel November or New Things November you call it?
It's yeah. So as many people in the community know, we have these themes every month, and we're about to go into new ways November, looking
New
for
ways.
new ways forward. But yeah, novelty, trying out not just new activities, but new ways of approaching things you already do, different perspectives, different ways of approaching something. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that. And if you want to find that, do just search for our calendars online, because they get millions of people engaging with them, and it's always lots of fun.
So and yeah, that's going to be memorable, November. But and then what you could do is, for example, you could organize. This is the advanced level. You could organize a picnic for July 20th next year. And first of all, you call it the Apollo picnic, because you're going to have first-time experiences. And the Apollo moon landing happened on July 20th. So every once in a while, somebody's going to talk about the moon landing, and that is going to trigger your memory of the picnic on July 20th. And the concept for the picnic is that everybody brings a dish or an ingredient they have not tried before. So if you haven't tried Danish herring, delicious. Or if you haven't tried habanero chili, it's delicious, but slightly dangerous. I still remember the first time I had habanero chili. And it's also good if it's something that scares you a little bit. So snails, something that may take a little bit of courage to eat would also be more memorable. And so you get all your friends together, organize it, call it the Apollo picnic, do it on July 20th, and bring something you haven't tried before. That is going to hopefully make a
I really love that.
And
it's, as you say, it's a sort of advanced level skill, but it's really clever because you're hooking an activity that's unique to you and a group to something that will be in the public narrative at a regular interval. That will be a trigger that, is an external trigger to remember this hopefully joyful experience. Another thing that I've seen mentioned a few times in the chat is to do with photographs, Mike. Obviously, these days a lot of that's digital, whereas before it might have been printed out in albums. But how can we use images, photographs to help both relive memories and also sort of lay down patterns that we, or opportunities to remember things in future?
Well, one of the tips I give in the book is I call it curating the happy 100. So if the audience is like me, we take a lot of pictures every year and we store them on our phones, and sometimes our phone breaks, or we change devices, and we have thousands and thousands of pictures on the digital devices. But back when I was growing up, we used to have old school photo albums that we actually brought out and looked at together as a family. And the pictures were not great. I mean, my mother had a special talent to sort of crop people's heads out. But we use those photos in a different way compared to how photos are now on our phones. So my advice would be, every once a year, it could be, over the holidays, or perhaps between, if you celebrate Christmas, between Christmas and New Year's, bring out the phones, all the family members, and then select, okay, which 100 or 50 or 10 pictures were actually the best moments this year, which were the happiest moments, and get them printed out. And then you can look at them in a different way and it will be more accessible. And I think also if you have kids, it's a really fun exercise to do with them, to see what did they actually find as the happiest moments in the past year. So pictures is one way, and that can trigger memories of that entire day if you just see one picture. But I want to come back also to the food and how powerful that is in memory, because I remember my Spanish publisher, her grandmother was called Modesta, which is Spanish for modest. But as my Spanish editor says, she really wasn't. But she was born in the early 20th century. So in 1920s in Spain, she wanted to go to university. And her dad was very against that because her sister had gone to university and died, and the dad linked that. So he said to Modesta, if you go to university, you'll never get married, and you'll die because, I don't know. But Modesta was very sort of persistent about it, and she ended up going to university, and she was chaperoned by her aunt, who would sit in the back of the class knitting and watching Modesta, watching the boys, and making sure that everything was going all right. And after class, Modesta and her aunt would go to a bakery placed at Plaza del Sol, which is in the center of Madrid, and have these special cakes called estrellas de hojaldre. Now I'm butchering that, but little pastry puffs in the shape of stars. And fast forward, I mean, Modesta, she did survive university, had 3 degrees in teaching and pharmaceuticals, lived through the Spanish Civil War and lived until she was 97. But I think it's interesting, in her later years, she asked her granddaughter to get her cakes, estrellas, from that bakery from Plaza del Sol. And I think it's because that taste, those cakes, reminded her of her happy 20s in Madrid, going to university, going to the bakery with her aunt. And I think that's another testimony to how much tastes are linked also with memories. So photos, one thing, but we can also create memory dishes.
Yeah, thank you. And it's a reminder of what you said earlier about the senses, whether it's the smell, the taste, the sight, whatever it is. It's really using that full range of triggers or associations, as you said. Mike, why don't we turn back to the community again for a second? I love this idea of reflecting on memories, and I think it might be nice just to encourage ourselves to do that and perhaps share them. So why don't we just all take a moment, take a pause wherever you are right now, close your eyes if you'd like to, just take a bit of a moment and just bring to mind a memory. It could be fairly recent, it could be many years ago, something that in your mind is a happy experience, something you look back on fondly, a bit the way Mike's described. And maybe again, if you feel able to or willing to, please just share it very briefly in a few words in the chat. So swimming in the south of France, spending time with my mum, when our bunny had surprise babies, mum's chestnut cake at Christmas, fun times with grandkids, going to, I missed that one, it flew past so quickly, going to university, time with mum before she passed, paddling, traveling the Lake District, taking a Reliant Robin to Portugal. That sounds like an adventure. Frog soup on vacation in Hungary. What are you seeing there, Mike?
I mean, it's going fast, so it's going by so fast. But I think this is a wonderful testimony to how much is actually stored up there.
Yeah.
And how many beautiful, happy memories have been made.
My dad's stew, driving a minibus, dog walks in the wood. The day my daughter arrived home, secretly liking ABBA all the time. I love that one. Realizing we are nature, Christmas morning, Sunday brunch after church, going to the Chinese while at university in my pajamas, Broadway in New York, my mum's perfume. Wow, such a variety of lovely things. I can feel how much these mean to people. It's lovely.
Playing piano duets with my husband. And actually, these are somewhat similar to the earlier question we had, right? A lot of these are also free. At least being an ABBA fan, I think, is something that doesn't have to come with a price tag. Eating paella on the beach. And again, we see a lot of common denominators here. And actually, for the book, I did something similar to this. We asked people to share a happy memory with us at the Happiness Research Institute, and we got more than 1,000 happy memories from 75 different countries, a lot of them very similar to this. And it was just really lovely to read, because you completely understand why these are happy memories to people. You would feel happy also eating stew with your dad and paella on the beach in Lisbon, or when
I just saw someone called Tilly mentioning walking on the Malvern Hills with her son, and I was born around there and spent many happy times walking on those hills. So that was lovely to see.
And can I share, because one of the 1,000 memories we received back when I was doing research for the book was a lady from the UK, I think in her 40s. She and her family had decided to go to the beach to eat breakfast. and they had this romantic idea of what it would be like. And they go to the beach, and it's cold and it's windy. And she wrote that they ended up eating sort of half-cooked raw porridge with sand in it. But it was a really happy memory and has been turned into a sort of family anecdote. And I really like that story. What she could do also to make that memory stick for her and her family is, of course, to retell that story again and again. Because the more we talk about the happy memories, the more likely they are to be stored in our long-term memory. If they had taken a picture of the event, could also work as a memory trigger, but it could also be, going back to that beach and picking up a stone, and if she has a daughter, turn it into a little necklace, and that will serve also as a memory trigger. Or together with her kids, drawing sort of a treasure map of happy memories. So where have we had happy memories in the past, and then surely the beach would go on that treasure map. So I think that there's many things we can do to create happy memories, but also make sure that those memories stick. We should also say, actually, if sometimes people struggle to remember any time they were happy in the past, especially if we are living with depression. That can also be one of the symptoms, that not only are we not feeling happy right now, but we are also struggle to remember times we were happy in the past. So that's also something we are sort of trying to help people with.
Thank you, Mike. It's been really insightful and interesting. I'm still loving the fact that these beautifully personal and entertaining memories are coming up. In a moment, I would love to come to the questions that are being asked. So if you have questions for Mike, please use the Q&A function, or if you see a question that someone else has posted that you'd like to hear answered, please do vote it or upvote it. But before we do that, and first of all, on the memory stuff, we will share in our follow-up links a link to your book on this topic, as well as your, where people can find out more about your work more generally. So that will be in the email tomorrow. But I'd just love, before we leave your work and happiness more generally and come to the questions, to just address perhaps a slightly bigger question around where we're heading as a global human family. And here we are on the eve of the COP26 climate change conference. Lots of people worried about future generations. I have children, and I worry about not only their future but their children's future. We are still coming out of this strange pandemic time, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of sort of unfairness and inequality in people in very different situations, some who've benefited, some who've really had a tough time. I feel that your work and your findings suggest a different set of priorities for our world. Maybe, as you were saying earlier, a bit less financially focused, a bit more focused on the things that matter. What do you see as being the most important things we should be keeping in mind, as our nations, as our societies, as a global human family, to make, a happier future for ourselves and for future generations?
That's a big question, Mark.
It is.
But I'm an optimist. Maybe we are a weird group that works within happiness research, but I think a lot of us are optimists. But I'm an optimist because we are seeing more governments embrace well-being as a new measure of progress. I'm an optimist because the biggest courses, in the history at both Yale and Harvard are now courses on happiness and well-being, and it shows me that especially the young generation are looking for something else and want to create the best possible conditions for people to thrive. I'm an optimist because we're seeing more and more companies actually actively try and create good conditions for their workers and focus on mental health. So governments, the young generation, companies are slowly pivoting towards what you and I have been working on for the past 10 years. So in that sense, I'm an optimist. And I'm also an optimist because I think that the entire pandemic, it has been difficult 18 months and people have lost their lives and livelihoods, and we've lost loved ones. My hope is that it's also an opportunity for reflection and gratitude. I mean, gratitude to perhaps some of the simple things like we've seen today in what creates happy memories and which activities people enjoy for free that perhaps we took for granted pre-pandemic. Meeting a coffee, not meeting a coffee, meeting a friend over a coffee is what brings me a lot of happiness. That I had to go without that for many months during the pandemic, and perhaps I took that for granted earlier on. So a bigger sense of gratitude for the simple pleasures in life, and then in terms of it being an opportunity for reflection, we usually see when people come back from maternity or paternity leave or a long vacation that they've thought about their routines or how they've organized or designed their lives and want to do things a little bit different. And I think this has just been one giant global maternity leave for for mankind. And I think a lot of us have reconsidered what do we want to come back to? What should we keep from the pre-pandemic world, and what should we change? Personally, I'm gonna be working more from home, 2 days per week. That adds a lot to my well-being. I really like going to the office as well and seeing my colleagues, but I also see the value in having some focused, concentrated time, for example, to write the books at home. So that's my hope for the post-pandemic world. Gratitude, reflection, but also optimism, because I do see things in a lot of places moving in the right direction.
Thank you, Meik. Let's move on to questions. And the first is from Joanne, whose I think question links back to something, the point you made about sometimes it's really hard to bring up happy memories. She says, when I recall positive events from the past, they make me feel sad. How can I use these memories to help me feel happy?
I think it's the Portuguese that have a word called, I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher this, saudade, which is sort of the sweetness and bitterness or sadness of things that are gone. So it's a celebration of what was, but are no longer here. In English, we have the word nostalgia. And then there's a sadness of having experienced lovely, happy moments that are now in the past. I think that is a ancient and global human emotion. I think that's fair to find a complex emotion to grasp. I think that's something we all experience. My hope is that we then celebrate the good there was. What I try to do, for instance, earlier I mentioned my mother died when she was quite young. What we do on her birthday still is we cook and eat her favorite dish. That's how we celebrate her now, and of course miss her. But it's a way to enjoy what she enjoyed eating and sort of think of her in fond ways. So trying to build in some positive in what is negative.
Thanks, Meik. The next question is from Lauren, who's used a strategy I've not seen before, but seems to work. She's put in brackets, please upvote this question. And it's therefore at the top of the list. Congratulations, Lauren. She asked, what do you say to people that roll their eyes when you share strategies to boost happiness? So it might be something that will work, but a colleague or a loved one might be skeptical about it. And you can't really force somebody to practice something. They might be resistant to it. Is there any way we can really encourage people around us to do things that we know will be good for their happiness?
I think essentially just do it yourself, and people will see and follow role models. If people are looking for edible mushrooms together with their friends in the forest and see how much enjoyment they get from that, they might go do it themselves or jump in the water if it's clean enough, after work. I think just do it yourself, and then over time, I think people will follow. But it's actually also coming back to sort of my writing and the books, because I remember having a conversation with John Halliwell that a lot in the audience, I'm sure are familiar with. John is one of the editors of the World Happiness Report, and all-round amazing human being, and basically the Mick Jagger of happiness research. But I talked with him about the sort of what's the balance between data and stories in writing. And I think he said a really good point in terms of that. And he said, data shapes the science, but the stories spreads the science. So yes, we need happiness research, and we need data, and we need evidence to understand what are the drivers of well-being. But people don't remember data, and they don't remember numbers. They remember stories. You know, a year from now, what people might remember from this conversation is images of eating paella on the beach in Lisbon, or me looking for edible mushrooms in a forest. That's what people will remember, those visual things. So I think being a role model, sharing stories of where people personally have found happiness, I think that's a much better way, instead of giving instructions.
I love that answer, and I certainly agree that prescribing or telling people what to do isn't the answer. And in fact, on that sense, I often use a question, because I find however skeptical somebody is, if you ask them, what do you find really makes you happy, or you people around you, whoever they are, whatever their background, everyone's got a view on that. And actually, just by encouraging to focus on what does make them happy, they'll say something like, they might even say being miserable makes me happy, you know, or whatever. But actually, that reflection on, yes, there are things in my life that bring a sense of joy and fulfillment, and being more conscious of that, I think is an interesting step. So I find that asking people is a really good intervention. Sarah's asked an interesting question. In a society that can be so negative, I'm not sure if she's referring to sort of general culture or the media or our politics or whatever, but anyway, I would agree with the observation. What is your quick tip to reset our internal happiness button in this negative place we find ourselves?
Yes, there's a lot of negativity, but I think there's also a lot of optimism and positivity, and I try to focus on that. I try to see what is going right with the world, and what's going right in terms of where, you know, my life and where Denmark is heading and where the world is heading. So I think asking the question, what is also going right, and try to focus on that, because yes, things go up and down in the world and in our lives, but hopefully we can also find some positive things.
Yeah, it's not about pretending everything's fine and ignoring the bad news. It's about drawing attention to the things that are going well too, which sadly many journalists often miss that opportunity in painting the negative picture. Next question, in fact, the current top rated question here is, can happy memories be clouded or blurred in the future if the person who you share those memories with is now no longer in a good relationship with you? So what's that link between the quality of our current relationships and how that affects memories as we look back?
Yeah, I mean, memories can definitely change over time and become blurred or clouded by other events. And doing research for the book, I've developed massive respect for our memory, but I also see how flawed it is. And people are going to remember events very differently. And it's also interesting to see, if you ask couples, let's say men and women, you know, how big a share of the cleaning do you do, or how big a share of the cooking do you do? You know, men will say, I do 40% of the cooking, and women will say, I do 80% of the cooking. And in every case, for every chore at home, if you add those two up, it's going to be more than 100%. And it's because we remember every time we did the cooking and every time we did the cleaning, and forget when our spouse did it. So our memories are flawed. Actually, writing the book and researching about memory, I think, has made me more more acceptable to the fact that others have other versions of what happened in the past than I do. That my memory is not perfect, that it's flawed, and we build things in that didn't happen or happened at other times into our memory. So I think that has actually helped me mend some of the disagreements I might have had with people, that just acknowledging that none of us remember correctly what actually happened.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. When you spoke earlier, Mike, about relationships being so important for happiness, one thing on my mind was, what does that mean for those people who are perhaps not in great relationships right now, or they're feeling lonely or isolated? And it also links to Benny's question here, who asks, have you done any research on happiness for individuals that are challenged when it comes to forming relationships? And he gives the example of people on the autism spectrum. But generally, I mean, I guess some people don't have great relationships, and so telling them that relationships are vital for happiness, may not necessarily help. How do you see that?
I think loneliness is part of the human experience. I mean, we study happiness and try to explore that, but in any human life, there's going to be setbacks. There's going to be periods of loneliness and stress and heartbreak, and that's part of the human experience. I know a lot of people find comfort when they're going through difficult times in poetry. So there's some great books out there called the Poetry Pharmacy. And it is essentially poems that fit the different challenges that we humans face in life: heartbreak, loss, stress, loneliness. And William, I forget his last name, but he said to me at one point, it's amazing how much comfort people find in reading Hafiz, I think his name was, a Persian poet that lived 700 AD, and knowing that there was a guy 1300 years ago that felt the exact same thing that I'm feeling today and wrote it in the most elegant way. And that can reduce the lonely feeling that people can have when they are going through a difficult time, feeling that I'm the only one in the world with this emotion or the thing that I'm dealing with right now, that this is something that humankind have endured for centuries. So poetry, I think, is an overlooked remedy when we are going through difficult times.
Thank you. And just to come back to Benny's point in the question about people who struggle with forming relationships, potentially through autism or other conditions, I guess it's worth saying that there are other great ways to be happy that don't involve necessarily relationships, although they can be really important. And you've already given some great examples, whether that's being outdoors, whether that's sort of tuning into what really matters to us. Poetry is a lovely example as well. So there are other avenues available, but great question. It also brings me to one I just spotted in the chat, which isn't in the Q&A, but someone just said, any tips for dementia sufferers? And I guess one of the most tragic aspects of dementia, of course, is about memory and indeed the loss of memory. I've seen some things suggesting that music can be incredibly helpful at sort of helping people stay connected. Anything else you've found when it relates to dementia and happiness?
Yes. So in the book, I also talk actually about a lady who suffered from memory loss and dementia. And what she did was actually create a memory room in her house. So printing out pictures of the places she had lived and some of her favorite places to visit, and of course her family members. And that for her was a way to sort of try and hold on to the happy memories she had achieved in the past. I also know that in the Netherlands, they are experimenting with creating streets, small villages where people with dementia are living, that represent a time period from their lives when they were young, that will trigger memories in the past. Also printing printing a photo of what used to be their front door on the the new door at the care facility they're living in, so they could recognize which room is actually mine, because it looks like their old front door. So I think we have here in the chat Mary saying the name of the village in Dutch. So I think that there are some great work being done, especially in the Netherlands, in this field.
Yeah, that's really helpful, and lots of people are saying really useful things in the chat as well, particularly around music as a real helper in those cases. I just want to come back to this concept of difficult memories, Mike, and how that relates to what we've talked about. Joy's raised another popular question here, asking if there's anything in your work about how traumatic experiences impact on our good memories. In her example, she had a really traumatic experience at age 14 and feels like some years of her life are sort of erased by that. How do you see that interplay between, I guess, traumatic experiences and memories and indeed happy memories?
Yeah, that is tricky, and a lot of us do have tragic events in our past that we would most like to forget. I'm not sure how to weave that away from the happy memories that hopefully also experienced or happened during those years. But it's a very good question. But my research for the book was focusing on happy memories.
Thank you. I mean, I think we should, acknowledge that there's lots of complexity when we look back in our lives, and as you say, people have experienced difficult things, and we can't change the past, but we can choose what we focus our attention on as we move forward. I would like to begin to move towards wrapping up because we're running out of time, and I'm incredibly grateful to all the things you've shared. I feel like I've learned a huge amount from you, Mike. And I also want to leave time in a moment for you to talk about this. I think it's a museum that you've been working on, which I think is really relevant, and other things you'd like to share. But just a more general happiness point that Anne has asked. I guess this is back to this territory of, in all the research you've looked at, what are the little actions that can make a big difference? Anne's just said, have you got any tips to get rid of that doom and gloom feeling I get on waking up in the morning and have to face the day ahead? What do you do to brighten up your start of day routine and bring a bit more joy, Mike?
I cycle to work. I mean, I think, again, coming back to doing something active. And we're blessed in Copenhagen with the infrastructure we have in terms of having an active commute. So the majority of people in Copenhagen, they cycle to work, myself included. Also, actually, the majority of members in parliament, they cycle to work. But I think doing something active in the morning is one way that sort of boosts my mood. So that would be my advice for that.
I love that one. As a very keen cyclist, many people know I jump on my bike most days as well. So I think that's fantastic advice. I have found personally that having a nudge in my to-do list to do some of the things that are well-being actions as well as my work tasks, a reminder to meditate, reminder to focus on things I'm grateful for, a reminder to check in with loved ones. That makes it more likely I'll do these little habits that I know will give me a boost rather than sort of pushing them away because they don't seem as important. So I found that really helpful. Mike, tell us about some of the exciting things you're working on, and particularly you mentioned a museum or some new project that you've been launching. What's going on there?
Yeah, so at the Happiness Research Institute, we usually get a lot of requests from people who wants to come by and see the office. And it's a boring, office. We sit in front of laptops looking like this. It's no fun. But we thought, why don't we create a place where people can come and explore some of the questions that we are working with and some of the answers that we think we've found. And we try to communicate, research through books or lectures or courses. And we thought, well, a museum is actually also a way to communicate findings. So last year, we opened the Happiness Museum here in Copenhagen. We call it a small museum about the big things in life. And hopefully people leave a little wiser and a little happier. And we have sort of different themes in the museum. There's the history of happiness. So how have the perception of the good life evolved over time? There is the science of happiness. How do crazy people like me try to measure well-being There is geography of happiness. Why are some countries or cities happier than others? So different things. And I think my favorite room is where we have asked people to write on a post-it what an ingredient for happiness is, or what a happy memories is. Very much like we've done here tonight. And now we have, I think, 2,000 post-its in that room, and it's just so much fun going around reading everything from Billie Eilish to somebody who wrote his idea of happiness is a quality lawnmower and a big lawn to mow, and I get it. I think it's just a lot of fun to see what people find are happy activities. And also, as a fun side note, we also have a small element around trust in a section around Nordic happiness. Trust explains why some countries are happier than others, and trust can be measured in different ways. But one way is, as crazy scientists have done, taken wallets with cash in them and ID papers, and then thrown those wallets on the street, and then see how many of the wallets are returned with the cash still in them. And globally, you actually see 50% of the wallets being returned with the cash in them. Now, in that section, we have also on the floor a wallet with money in it, because we wanted to sort of bring that statistic more to life. And several times a day, people come up to the person working in the reception saying, somebody dropped a wallet. It's part of the exhibition. Sorry, I'll put it back. Until recently, it was stolen. So much for the high levels of trust in the Nordic countries. There's bad apples.
But it's the exception that proves the rule, maybe. I think you've seen many months of trust. I loved, there's, again, lots of lovely comments here, but Despina said, I hope the Happiness Museum plays ABBA music, given the comment we had earlier on. Meik, well, actually, first of all, gratitude to everyone who's been part of this event this evening. It's been a lovely community engagement as always. Really grateful for all the comments and questions and supportive things. And also thank you to everyone who made a small donation to Action for Happiness to be part of this event, to allow us to keep putting on these great activities. If you haven't had a chance to do that and you've enjoyed this event, then there will be a chance in the follow-up email tomorrow. But above all, massive gratitude to you, Meik. It's been a lovely conversation. I've learned a lot. You've shared a huge amount of wisdom and insight. Is there any final thought you'd like to leave us with?
Then it should be just to share an embarrassing story. It's also how we can sort of, try and take something that we're perhaps not so proud of and turn it into something good, or take control over it. So I think this was 3 or 4 years ago. I was taking part in a TV show in the UK. I think it was called This Morning Show, and it's a big show. I think they have more viewers than I have countrymen in Denmark. And I'm talking about my latest book at the time, the little book of Lykke. And towards the end of the interview, I think the host was called Philip. He asks, so you've written about Hygge, and now you've written about Lykke. What are you going to write about next? And I thought his Danish was really good. And I know in the UK you've been watching a lot of the Danish TV dramas in the original language, and there's the political drama that takes place. I think you pronounce it Borgen in the UK, right? And I thought, maybe he had seen that one. So he says, you've written about Lykke and Hygge, what you're going to write about next. And I say, well done on pronouncing Danish. You must have been watching a lot of Danish porn, which is how we pronounce it. But he heard, you must have been watching a lot of Danish porn. So he starts to laugh. All the rest of the hosts, they start to laugh. I have no idea what's going on. The other host says, what did he say? I'm afraid to ask. And that's the end of the interview. So, and when I found out what they thought I had said, that was one of the most embarrassing moments in my life. But, sometimes I will actually, if I go to to an international presentation, I might actually share that story just to say, okay, it's not my first language. So if there's something I say mistakenly, that's, please raise your hand and ask a question. So instead of it being something that I could still beat myself up over today, I actually try and use it as an anecdote that often brings smile on
That is a
people's faces.
lovely story. I'd never
And
heard
take
that
control.
before. That's really, really funny. And yeah, that's Philip Schofield, I think, who many people on this chat will know. And the fact you asked him that question is just genius and hilarious. Mike, thank you so much. Keep up the great work. We'll share your links with the community tomorrow. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and look forward to seeing you next time. Take care, Mike. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Bye-bye.